Osborne Industries, former home of the Green Goblin, is quiet at night. The place has been shut down for a while. It's completely deserted. But then, suddenly, the whole facility is covered in crackling, roaring fire as a familiar figure hits the ground with a massive explosion. The goblin is right in the middle of the blast, eyes glowing, grinning like a demon. Now that he's back, he lets his transformation fade as the fires die down, reverting to the human Norman Osborn. But his eyes still have the same fiery red glow. No longer a burning, hellish monster, Norman heads into the building. Osborne Industries had been abandoned for a long time. His old office had been ransacked. Nothing's left in the safe but a few discarded bits of paper. Norman glares at the now empty walls before turning his attention to the picture of a horse that still remains on the wall. He takes it down, revealing a hidden retina scanner. It registers Norman with a brief flash of light, and a hidden door slowly clanks open. Within is a treasure trove of supervillain gear. Familiar mechanical arms, a fully stocked lab, and vial after vial of goblin venom. Norman picks up a container of the glowing green fluid. He pushes stacks of money off the table, clearing it. He's got work to do. In Miles's family's apartment, he's just been confronted with the reborn Peter Parker. The two just stare at each other for a second. Eventually, Peter asks for his web shooters back. Miles is still stunned to see the dead guy walking around. He puts his hands up to Peter, wanting to make sure he's real. "Those gloves need to be washed," Miles says, putting his hands down. He still can't say anything. "I mean, what do you say when a dead man just comes back? Can you hear me?" "I'll wait for a few more seconds," Peter says. The two just stand there. Then finally, Miles is done processing this. "What the hell?" Miles says. "Language," Peter replies. Miles doesn't care about that. He's just amazed that Peter's here, the original Spider-Man. Peter doesn't want to get into the details. He just came here to get his stuff. Miles won't even let him wave that off, though. Do Peter's family even know he's back? Peter admits they don't, and as far as he's concerned, they won't. That's none of Miles's business anyway. He never asked Miles to be Spider-Man. And while that's true, as Miles points out, everyone else in Peter's life said they were okay with him taking the role. They even held a memorial for Peter. Peter knows. He was even watching it rather than follow up on that. Miles gets an idea. Is this Peter from another dimension? That's happened before. He's met another Peter in the past. But this version of Parker is surprised by that idea. It's probably not another dimensional crossing thing. Not knowing what Miles is talking about, Peter tries to apologize for freaking him out. He still wants his web shooters back, though. Miles can't even process that. It's crazy to him that Peter won't tell Aunt May he's alive. Peter tries to excuse it, saying it'll put her through too much stress. Miles stands his ground, though. May thought her nephew died. He has to tell her. Peter won't budge either. He just comes back to his question. "Can I have my web shooters back? She gave them to me because she thought you died." Peter claims he did die. But when Miles asks him to explain, the original Spider-Man doesn't take it well. "Hey, I don't know you, kid. I didn't ask for you to pick up the mantle," Peter says. Miles won't back down, giving the angry Peter an ultimatum. Either Pete tells Aunt May or I will. The two Spideys stare each other down. "I just want you to know I was trying to do everything I could to avoid getting weird with you," Miles says. "Step back, last chance. Just sit down and talk to me. It's about you." Peter grabs Miles's hand, looking like he's about to rip the web shooter off. This backfires on him hard. Reflexively, Miles activates his venom blast. The crackling lightning is enough to knock Pete across the room, crashing down against the bed. Miles puts his hands up, apologizing and trying to get Peter to calm down. Pete's actually jealous of Miles. They both got bitten by a radioactive spider, but he didn't get the cool blast. Miles theorizes that they got bitten by different types of spiders. Peter can follow that logic, but he's already clenching his fist. His first punch throws Miles back into a chest of drawers. Miles blinks, not sure what is happening. Peter's already charging forward, ready for a follow-up, claiming he asked Miles nicely already. Then there's a blinding flash of red light. When Miles comes to, he's still up against the drawers. Now, though, Peter's gone, and Spidey 2's got a splitting headache. Miles takes a second to check out what happened. There's a window open in the apartment's main room. That's probably how Peter got away. Looking down at his wrists, Miles finds his web shooter is gone. Peter really knocked him out and stole them. Miles can't even process that, though. He's still wondering how Peter Parker is still alive. Then he has it. Clone. Miles suits back up and jumps off into New York, chanting the word under his breath. This has to be a clone of the original Peter Parker. It's the only logical explanation, right? He runs the idea past his best friend Genki over at his house. Miles's friend is always good at listening, though he doesn't get why Spidey jumped to this conclusion. Miles explains that he's run into this exact situation once before. Jessica Drew, the world's Black Widow, is a clone of Peter Parker, and she broke into his apartment too. She was even the one who finally got Miles to accept the mantle of Spider-Man. Genki admits this at least makes it possible that this new Peter's another clone. The tech exists. It could have been used more than once. Still, this doesn't change much. The two spitball about how to handle this, telling Aunt May, Gwen, or MJ that Peter's back, only for it to be revealed it's just a clone, not really him, would be cruel. They could try to find out more information from Jessica Drew, but her phone's off before they can work out what to do. Detective Maria Hill shows up, ordering Miles to get in her car. She makes it clear she knows he's Spider-Man and that he's in trouble. Genki yells at Miles to run, even as Hill tries to insist he get in her car. Forced to make a choice, Miles ultimately jumps the car, ready to make a run for it. Hill didn't see that coming. In just a second, Spidey is gone. Maria Hill stares at an empty street before snarling and Genki, calling him an idiot and driving off. As soon as she's gone, Genki starts to let his panic show, and it only gets worse when Miles reappears, having just been hiding nearby invisibly. They don't know why the cops are after Spidey, but it can't be good. Before Miles can continue his investigation into fake Peter, though, Genki gets an alert on his phone. He set up notifications for any news on Spidey, and he just got a big one. The two boys are both shocked by what they see. Norman Osborn alive. This doesn't make sense. Norman Osborn is supposed to have died killing Peter Parker. Now they're both back. Miles and Genki don't know how this could have happened, but Miles remembers one big problem. Norman died right in front of Peter Parker's house. He knows where Pete and Aunt May live. Genki just tells him to go, and Miles is quick to do so, suiting back up and heading out towards the Parker house as fast as he can go. Over at Osborn Industries, former S.H.I.E.L.D. director Monica Chang is leading a federal raid on the building. She's not happy with the feds. They blamed her for S.H.I.E.L.D.'s failure, shut down her organization, and now they want her help dealing with supervillains. Still, they've got a job to do, even if Monica is convinced it's a wild goose chase. There's no way Norman would be hiding somewhere this obvious. The troops step into the main laboratory. It's clearly abandoned. Chang muses at how many Spider-Men were made in this place, before her squad mate points out that someone has been here recently. There's fresh fire damage to the lab. That's enough to make Chang take this seriously. Their next stop is Osborn's office. Monica checks the vault first, wondering what's hidden there. It just takes her a second to spot the hidden room. Throwing the door wide, Monica points her gun at Norman, declaring him under arrest. Osborn smirks. "Do you still have the authority to do that, ex-S.H.I.E.L.D. director Chang?" Monica calls for her team, trying to keep Osborn covered until they get there. Norman doesn't fight back, just talking in a calm voice. Mostly he just goes over Chang's failures. As far as he's concerned, she just wasn't close to Nick Fury's level. It's just the way it is. Some people fail upwards. Some trip over themselves and fall upwards. Sometimes a Nick Fury just up and goes, and the powers that be don't know what to do without him. So they pick the dumbest schmuck they can find, someone they think they can control. The feds are ready to bring Osborn in, and now that he's on the floor, Norman won't stop talking, grinning. "Your biggest failure is that you were sitting on a gold mine. You were standing so close to true power and you did not have the vision to do anything with it. You let me slip through your fingers and I have no pity for someone like you." Monica tries to shoot the transformed goblin as he runs at her, but it's too little, too late. Norman grabs her head with a burning hand of fire, passing poor Director Chang aside, her head still engulfed in flame. The goblin turns his attention to the cops. They open fire on him, the bullets bouncing off to no effect. Norman bats the assault squad back, using one of them as a club to batter the other two. One of the feds falls out of the far window, still covered in fire, much to the shock of the helicopter pilot. The impromptu missile brings down the police vehicle, leading to yet another massive explosion. The entire Osborn Industries facility is burning now, and from below, Norman surges upwards, carried by the force of an explosion. Meanwhile, Miles has finally reached the Parker house. It has taken him a while. He's had to stick to buses and crawl up walls slowly, thanks to Pete having stolen his web shooters. Still, now he's here. Miles sneaks up to the window trying to check what's going on. Looking in through the window, there's no sign of anything being off. The place looks abandoned. Unfortunately, a woman taking her Great Dane for a late walk finally spots Spidey snooping around. The two just stare at each other in an awkward moment of silence. Miles tries to break the ice, but the dog takes it badly, snarling at him. What was I thinking anyhow? Miles thinks. Norman Osborn killed Peter Parker. He killed him right here on the street, and I come here and... What? Let him kill me? And as soon as he thinks that, Spidey spots a bright light like a shooting star, heading right his way. Miles looks on as the Green Goblin blazes his path back here, the Great Dane barking all the while. Norman hits the ground like a fireball, the sheer explosive force enough to knock Miles across the street. Spidey picks himself back up. He can remember the last time this happened. This is indeed the exact same spot Green Goblin killed Spider-Man in what was supposed to have been their final fight. And now, Miles is right where Peter was, a burning, terrifying goblin standing over him. Norman looks more than ready for an encore performance. I know who you are, Miles says. I assume if you are dressing like Peter Parker, you are standing in for him. Why are you here, young man? Are you here to devote yourself to me or to him? What? I helped birth you into this world, Daddy? Nah, smart mouth, Norman says. Say no more. You are a disciple of Peter Parker. Then allow me to honor you with a full Parker experience. Norman charges right at Miles, trying to gore him with those massive goblin horns. Spidey's too quick for the goblin, jumping through the air to avoid him. Now he's above Norman. Miles punches him hard in the back of the head before landing perfectly. The blow isn't enough to hurt the goblin, unfortunately. Norman smirks. A second later, Spidey's hand is covered in fire. Before he can recover, the goblin throws a burning car right at the second Spider-Man. He's not holding back today. That won't be enough to stop Miles, though. He leaps away, the fire already put out, and despite the dodges, he fades, activating his invisibility. Norman's impressed. He hadn't expected this new Spider-Man to do something Parker couldn't. The goblin narrows his eyes, pondering. You blended in? Fascinating. Did you run away? No one would blame you, not a single soul. But no, Miles is still here. He brings down a mailbox over Norman's head, crying out that this is for Peter Parker. The blow has enough strength to knock the goblin into a hydrant. The spray distracts him, giving Miles a chance to move. His next punch hits Goblin right in the mouth and lands with enough force to finally draw some blood. But then Norman backhands Spidey, sending him flying. The fighting continues to rage as news reports come in. Detective Hill, Genki, Mary Jane, Aunt May, Gwen. Everyone sees Miles fighting the goblin in Forest Hills, right where Peter Parker, the original Spider-Man, supposedly died. This time, though, Spidey's holding his own. Miles actually offers his opponent the chance to grab a coffee together and talk this out, even as he lands a jab right on the goblin's jaw. The police are en route to Forest Hills. The first responders are already working on evacuating civilians. Norman slams the ground, trying to swat the spider for his wisecrack about the coffee date, but Miles admits he isn't joking. He doesn't know why this guy's so angry. He's happy to end the fight and listen to him. Rather than agree with that, the goblin grabs a car and throws it at the cops. Their vehicles explode in a cataclysm of metal and fire. Spidey yells at him for that, but Norman bats him away, turning up his fire powers. Miles is burning again. He tries to put out the flame, rolling across the ground. But now he's prone on the dirt, with a super strong opponent looming over him. Before the goblin can strike, though, a voice comes from his other side. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Normie. I mean, you can kill me all you want, but if you lay one more hand on the president of my fan club, I'm gonna have to smack the ugly right out of you. And by the looks of you, that's gonna take all night. Boom. Everyone is shocked. The original Spidey is back. Norman's outraged at this, jumping right at Peter with both hands burning, just like Miles did before him. However, Peter vaults over the charging goblin, punching him in the back of the head as he goes. Norman is still furious, screaming at Peter. How can he be alive? He tries to smash the original Spidey with a crackling roundhouse, but Pete ducks under the blow easily. Meanwhile, the cops are getting ready to open fire. Peter pushes himself up, using the goblin's horn to hoist himself higher. The cops start shooting, covering the goblin with bullets just a second after Spidey jumps away. Infuriated, Norman throws a fireball at his old foe, covering half the street in flames. The goblin screams that he'll burn this whole world down, but before he can say much more, he gets a face full of webbing. Peter covers his legs next, pulling Norman down to earth. And with that, Miles sees his chance, getting close to Norman. He touches him for just a second. The goblin, angry, swipes at Spidey, who somersaults away. Peter snarks at his fellow spider for just poking their giant foe's ankle. Wait for it! Norman's eyes narrow as he stares at his foes, ready to burn them down. Wait for it! The goblin charges out of the inferno right at Spider-Man, promising to incinerate everyone. Wait for it! Before Norman can take another step, though, he stops, feeling something strange. That's when Miles's venom shocks kick in. Norman screams in pain as the electricity crackles through his body. Both Spider-Men are thrown back as the goblin's fire powers go into an explosive overdrive. The cops scramble to get clear as their own vehicles are thrown right at them, the officers running for dear life. Now he's on the ground. Norman is moaning. Everything is wrong. Rather than continue the fight, he jets back off into the sky. The two Spider-Men take this second to catch their breaths. Now that the fight is over, Peter and Miles are on much better terms. Neither would have survived against Norman without the other. Before they can make any plans for what to do next, however, the cops order both Spideys to get on the ground. They are under arrest for this. The news helicopters still sit in the sky, broadcasting the fate of these Spider-Men. Aunt May and Gwen have both been watching this whole time, their faces wet with tears. Gwen insists this new Spidey can't be Peter, but looking at him even over the TV, May can tell that's her nephew. Somehow her Peter is still alive.